if you look at the vast expanse of what we've experienced as human beings, we find through various cultures epics. In the ancient world, these were epics. Whether it's ancient Greece, whether it's ancient Abyssinia, whether it's ancient India, whether it's ancient Mali, wherever you turn to, or the cuneiform in the Mesopotamia, there have always been attempts to record significant events of the past. Okay, so these documents, they are all documents, are forms of historiography. There were attempts to record history. Now, in some cultures, there is no historiography. So, for example, in Mali, they don't have a written form of history. Okay, they have what we know as 𝗏𝗏𝗏. The 𝗏𝗏𝗏 is a tribe, and within the tribe there are specific members who memorize the lineage, the ancestry, the dynasties, and the achievements of kings and nobles, and they convey that orally. Yeah, they recite it orally. So, for example, the epic of Sundiata Keita is a very famous epic in West Africa. He was the founder of, or some people say the mythical founder of, the great Mali Empire, and his entire story is oral. It's not written anywhere. It is transmitted from generation to generation to generation orally. And these men, who are known as 𝗏𝗏𝗏 in French, but in Wolof, I speak Wolof, we know them as 𝗏𝗏𝗏, okay? They're poets. So they convey the story of the king, and every generation, it's very interesting actually, because what happens is, they're a tribe, okay? It's a tribe. You cannot just become one of them. You have to be born within the tribe to become one of them. And each successive generation, the father will train his children to memorize the lineage that came before them and the stories, and on top of that, their contemporary age as well. So could you imagine there was a king and he has a poet. So the poet will follow the king everywhere and will memorize everything he's done, his achievements, his lineage, everything else. He will make songs about that, and he will recite to the king, right, in public, and praise him.
Lanjuruto min jetending alola daron ngasede ako nyimu alola daridi wayik ang alola daron ngasede ako nyimu alola kiridi Lanjuruto la kumbo nyimete balova. Now
these songs will then be conveyed to his son, but the son will also follow the son of the king. So for each child born of the lineage of the emperor, of the king, there's a specific poet assigned to him. And so through the generations, they collect all of this information and convey it. Now in the modern era, we don't have kings anymore, we have presidents, but what happens is the tradition continues. So these people, they advertise, for example, on Facebook, right? So if you have a wedding, or you have like a significant event, they will come to your wedding and they'll sing about your ancestors. And this is very similar to the Arabic tradition of your ancestry. It's a very big thing, you know. 𝗾𝙗𝗚𝗏 حَتَّى زُرْتُمُ الْمَقَابِرَ. That they used to go all the way to the graves and talk about their grandparents or their ancestry. So that's one very elaborate form of history telling, for example, which only works in West Africa. Okay, and in West Africa, because I'm from West Africa, I can guarantee you, written history is untrusted. So in the same way in the Western Hemisphere where I'm born and I live in, oral history is not trusted. When you go to Africa, Western Africa specifically, written history is not trusted. Why? Because they say this: history, to be acceptable from anyone, has to come through human beings. We need to know the lineage of the poet who's reciting, so that we can trust that he comes from a thorough line of poets. So we can trust what he's telling us. If you write history, anyone can write anything. So they don't trust written history, which is interesting actually, perspectives. So from the Western perspective, they will not trust oral tradition. And from at least from the West African perspective, if you have to write history, it's not worth writing. Right? So to show you how complicated it is, every civilization its own tradition. Mahabharata in India, very famous epic, okay, very famous epic. The Kebra Nagast in Ethiopia. I've done a full documentary on this, by the way, on Patreon. It's the national, this book effectively legitimated any king from the Solomonic dynasty. You had to have the book to legitimate your rule. And it has a history, some people say folklore, depends on how you see it, that goes back to the Solomonic Empire. Okay, so that's another document of history. And then you've got the Greek, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and various types, the cuneiform tablets discovered in Mesopotamia. You've got the Rosetta Stone, which was discovered in Egypt during Napoleon's campaign in 1798 to 1801. So these are all documents that make up history or historiography. Okay, and the Shahnameh, of course, in Persia, very famous. Yeah, Shahnameh in Persia, very famous. The Epic of Gilgamesh is one, very famous. So each civilization has its own tradition. Now Islam comes along in the 7th century and completely changes the entire platform when it comes to history telling and history recording. Islam, of the major civilizations, because Islam is a civilization, is the last. When we look at the classical and the ancient, the last civilization is Islamic civilization. However, it was the quickest to begin writing history. Some civilizations lasted 1,000, 2,000 years, and it was only later on they began to write their history. But within Islamic history, it was in the 1st century we began having written history. So it's very, very quick compared to the others that took maybe 1,000 years to begin writing. Within Islamic history, from the very 1st century, we have biographies, we have maghazi, we have different types of historical discipline that begin to emerge. So the historians actually state that the Muslims were ahead when it comes to historiography. They came last, but they adopted writing or written history a lot quicker within the 1st century. It's very remarkable, actually, compared to other types of history. But Islamic history, its character and its cadence is very different. There are very different reasons why we as Muslims have recorded history, and we have different forms of history, which is very fascinating, honestly. When we begin to delve into this world of history, 𝗏 and we look at the different forms of historical exercise and departments and the reasons why this was written this way and that was, it's fascinating stuff. Which is why, as somebody who loves Islamic history, I find it strange and difficult to accept when people say to us that Islamic history is not the same as Western history. It's a bit, you know, it's not reliable, it's not true, it's pseudo history. Well, if you look at the historical records, we have a vast catalogue. Our way of compiling history is unique, but more importantly, it is a universal history, in that it isn't a history of just the Persians, or just the Romans, or just the Chinese, or just the Western African, the Songhai Empire, or just the Solomonic dynasty. Islamic history, unlike any other history, is a world, it's a universal history, which makes it unique. It's really fascinating. If you can imagine having this vast expanse of historical narrative from all over the world, and all of it comes under what? 𝗏 al-Islami. It's one of the miracles of Islam, wallahi. When you think about this kind of stuff, it's a miracle of Islam that we have. So what do we then have within Islamic history? Islamic history has typologies, or different buckets, different departments. It's not just, when you say Islamic history, don't imagine for once that it's just one category, it's a monolith. History is history, no. Islamic history has various categories, and I've done, to the best of my ability, broken it out to the key components. There are sub-components, but these are the key components. And I'm going to explain to you what each one means and the significance of each one.
Welcome to HistoryUn, the world's leading online learning platform specializing in Islamic history. To discover the HistoryUn mobile app and participate in regular live and interactive seminars and tune in directly from your handset from anywhere in the world. Enjoy instant access to a growing catalog of on-demand streaming content exclusive to the platform, accessible from a variety of devices including desktops, tablets, and cell phones. Connect instantly with our global community of history enthusiasts via our private community forum. To find out more about our online history programs and resources, visit our website today at www.historyun.com.